Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
So, pardon me, but do you have any Grey Poupon albums?
What? What?
Welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. Not to be confused with Two Guys Talking About Lettuce, which is probably a vegetable community podcast.
It is, and it's really out there.
You know, I wonder if somewhere in an alternate universe there is a Carl Stevenson with a YouTube channel who talks about these OG, meaning organic in this case, tomato starter plants.
I would, if it was me talking about vegetables, it'd be there's only like 5 of them that I would say are edible. The rest of them, stay away.
Okay, that's a little inside joke because someone had commented that they thought they saw this podcast on Spotify, which I don't believe it is yet.
No, I don't think so.
But you find Two Guys Talking About Vegetables.
Yes, it's actually called Two Guys Talking About Lettuce.
Two Guys Talking About Lettuce. My bad.
So please feel free to check that out on Spotify and give us kind of a heads up on what the heck that's about.
Well, the Grey Poupon, I didn't mean to catch you flat-footed. I was trying to show my inner levels of etiquette and asking very politely, pardon me, sir, but... So that is kind of the subject of today's podcast, and that is record store etiquette. What customers, a lot of new people coming into the game here.
There is. There really is. Every time I go into record stores, you see the crowd is much more diverse as they come in. And you have some of us collectors that have been around since, the earth was created. It's, we kind of know, okay, here's how you do things. But then you have others that, well, it's their first time in. And shall we say rookie mistakes?
We can say that indeed. So
yes.
Before we get to that, though, let's do our weekly ritual and do the vinyl community side of things and talk about some of the goodies that were brought in the past week.
I think that's great. You want me to start off?
I can, because I've only got a couple.
All
and
right.
I know you're going to want to comment on one of them in particular. The first was, this is an upgrade. I like to upgrade. We all do from time to time when you get something and you find a better copy or a different version or an older one. This is from an album that I have had in my collection since probably the late 1980s or early 1990s, and that's the Tubes, What Do You Want From Live? A great live album from the Tubes, one of my favorite. Just a tremendous rock and roll and punk album. And I've had this in my collection really forever and ever. I found a white label promo copy of it,
neat.
And it's in decent shape. And so, you know what? This one that I've had, it's not quite as a sentimental attachment as it could be. So the white label promo in it goes because I've got a thing for those.
Yeah, you do.
So just fun stuff. The other one, and I know I showed you this the other day. I sent you a text, was the Velvet Underground's self-titled, their third one.
Yes.
I got a copy of that in one of the collections we had earlier, and I saw this, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a listen. And I am very ashamed to admit, I have never given that album the attention that I think it deserved. And after listening to it once and then another time, it went into the personal.
To me, it's an album where Lou Reed John Cale was out, and Lou Reed said, I want some hits. I want to be on the radio. I want this to be commercial. It just still nobody cared. But the songs are really very nice.
And I've always been partial to Loaded, which was their second. And
Yes.
Only recently I added a reissue of the Velvet Underground and Nico, the banana peel cover that we've talked about before. So this one I've known about it, but I've never given it a chance. And now I'm really glad it did. The OGs on that, though, holy cow, they are through the roof in the triple digits. This one that I picked up was a 1985 version, a reissue. No sloucher in Discogs, by the way. That's still a valuable album, but just nowhere near the OG.
My very first time I got that was that 80s version. That's when I first got into the Velvet Underground. At my local record store, Radio Wasteland, I did get an OG eventually that's in beautiful condition. But I just think for the longest time, that was my favorite Velvet's Underground album. And now it's kind of moved into more of that earlier John Cale droning stuff.
Well, I'm going to give this a few more tries and see where I rank that up against my OG of Loaded that I've had forever, but never really listened to.
Sure.
So what did you bring in this week? That's cool.
One thing was neat is there's a box set. It's called Intrigue, the Steven Wilson mixes. And it's a 4 CD box set. I think it was a 7-album box set. And it looks at the music, post-punk. Mostly post-punk, but you'll find into some of that noise rock that was coming out. Some of this a little more weird avant-garde music out of the UK from 1979 to 1989. And there's a lot of groups on there that you're familiar with, but the songs you're not. I knew the Thomas Dolby song, but for the most part, they're all deep cuts that are on here. And so it takes you on a trip. There's a wonderful booklet that goes through each of the albums that, this cut's coming from. And so it takes you on this journey. But it was very interesting. It's not something you're going to put on let's have a dance. Let's pop this stuff on. It's not like that at all. But it was very interesting music from the experimental side of the 80s in the UK.
And I think it's an interesting thing, and I know we've talked about that when you were thinking about ordering the vinyl, but ultimately decided on the compact disc. I think there was more breadth to the CD version, and it was a little easier to maintain, not taking up as much space. But B, there are bands that are popular, but not stuff that you often hear. So whether it's an obscure band that you may have heard the song of before, and you mentioned the deeper cuts, that's a very interesting take on that. He very easily could have put out something, with REM's big ones or The Cure, and doing something they're more popular like Boys Don't Cry or Thomas Dolby Blinded Me with Science, which is not the greatest song on that record.
Yeah. There wasn't really, I think Sisters of Mercy, Corrosion was the one that I really knew. Thomas Dolby had Airwaves, which I knew that song. But otherwise, all these, the XTC was on there. Tears for Fears was on there. But it was the earlier, generally more experimental type music that was just a little something different. And the UK was exploding. I mean, really the 80s in the UK, music was pretty phenomenal.
So that's not something you want to get if you're looking for a K-Tel compilation of greatest well-known hit songs.
It is not, but if you're interested in post-punk and that kind of music, Abby, then this is a wonderful collection to dig into.
Cool. Well, what else did you bring in?
There was a brand new album just came out from a group, Altoon Gun. They're out of the Netherlands, and I may be saying it wrong, but they do Anatolian rock, music from Turkey. They take Turkish folk music and they make it into rock. And they've been around now over 10 years. But their last couple albums, they went they began to stray away, kind of a disco type feel, dance type feel. This one, it is full on Anatolian rock, Turkish psych. It's wonderful. The whole album from start to finish is just wonderful music. They're back to how they started. And from the Netherlands, but they have roots with Turkey.
Always admiring your tremendous variation and diversity that you bring in. It's this week Turkish rock. We're digging
Turkish, right? Yeah, there's that Turkish psych is pretty cool stuff. There's some kind of garbage out there, but if you can find the good stuff, it's very interesting because of the instrumentation that comes in Turkey. Another really neat one. This came out the end of last year. Is Las Robertas, and they're out of Costa Rica. And the album's called Love is the Answer. The Elton Gun is called Ask, by the way. I should probably say the name of the album. Love is the Answer is just from Las Robertas. And it's shoegaze, but also psych pop. The lead vocalist, her voice is wonderful. It's very dreamy, and you almost kind of get a little bit of dream pop going on. The shoegaze isn't like Jesus and Mary Chain, isn't like Loveless, from My Bloody Valentine. It's not that hardcore, but it's there. There's the drone going on, but there's melody happening. Jesus and Mary Chain has melody. You just have to dig to find it, but it's really buried in there. This, you can hear it, and it's just a very, nice album to listen to.
A lot more accessible.
It is, and it would have probably been in my top 10 last year if I had had it. I really liked it a lot. And then I finally got in two big albums that I used to have, been kind of looking for them, hoping they would pop in here, but they hadn't. Uskadu's New Day Rising and Zen Arcade.
Okay, yep, always fun to get.
Oh my God, New Day Rising was the very first Uskadu album I ever bought, and I put that thing on and go, wow. I mean, it's one of those, my hair blew back, and go, listen to this. Hardcore with a pop melody, and they're channeling that 60s, that inner 60s pop sound that they wanted, but pure hardcore guitars going on.
I think that's a testament to Bob Mould and the Do and the fact that people don't give those up. That's why they're so hard to find.
They are you're right. They do not, and the prices of those, they're not cheap, but they're not out of this world either. And I finally was able to find a few that were decently priced and came in. So huge part of my collection that I was missing. I was glad to get back.
Cool. Congratulations.
Yep.
Well, on to the subject at hand. As of the recording of today's episode, we're just a couple of weeks out from Record Store Day. And that got me thinking, we were talking about some subject ideas, and it's always been in my mind to at least maybe do a video or have some sort of discussion about record store etiquette. And with so many new people showing up to experiment, learning about records, picking them up for the first time. And every week, and not a week goes by here at the store that I get somebody new coming in saying, I just took this up a few weeks ago. I just got a turntable. I need to know where to start. I thought that this might be a cool subject matter to broach upon. But I need to ask a favor of you, please.
Yes.
As the record store owner side of two guys talking about podcasts, I don't want this to turn into a great big complaint fest on my part.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, I hate it when customers do this. Because I love it when customers come in and ask questions. And I love having new people in. So I'm walking that fine line of saying, hey, here's some very cool pointers about what to do when you go to a record store, what not to do. Versus, I really hate it when people do this, Steve.
Yeah, sure.
So keep me on track.
Okay, we'll try and keep you on track, but I really like those stories.
Well, there'll be a few, don't worry. Well, let's start with Record Store Day, because that is a specific one where a lot of new people show up to record stores in particular. They may have heard about it in a newscast. The recent news of vinyl outselling CDs is going to bring out some more people who are curious at the very least. And if you are brand new to record stores and Record Store Day in particular, there's a few things that you should expect wherever you go to one. The first of which being the lines.
Yeah, and the lines, I've been doing Record Store Day for years now, and the lines get longer and longer and longer. In fact, now I don't really come in to stand in the line, which sometimes is kind of a shame. It's just, I got stuff I have to do Saturday morning with work. Because in those lines is a great time to commune with your fellow record store, with your fellow record collectors. And it is a wonderful time as you're sitting there in line and you start to talk with them. What are you getting? What are you going? And, I used to always be in the front of the line, and I would have my list, and the next guy would come in, well, what's on your list? And we would be looking. And then the next one, what's on your list? Well, I think you only got 3 of these. You might be out. But it would be a lot of fun as the line would keep growing. And I used to come in, and I'd go to Detroit for this because you weren't open yet. But I'd be there at, 4 a.m. Now you have to be overnight to be first in line, which is way beyond me.
Typically speaking, our line, there's a couple of diehards, and God love them. You guys are great, that show up usually about 6 or 7 o'clock the night before.
Yeah.
And they make a night out of it. And it is a great, great, as you mentioned, kind of a communal time to get together and hang out with people you see maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah. What I used to do is I would come and I would bring a box of donuts. I'd even brought coffee a few times. So the first people that came in, I'd have my chair. I'd sit it right there by the front door. And then as they would come in, have a donut. And we would just start having fun talking about our collections and what we're looking for. And how long you've been collecting.
Now, side note to this, the lines in smaller stores like ours tend to be prior to the opening, and then we get through them fairly quickly. Larger cities, and this before we opened, we used to go down to Ann Arbor, my daughter and I, in Lansing, and mid-afternoon, talking 1 or 2 in the afternoon, there was still lines that were 2 hours deep to get into some of these record stores. So expect that.
Yes. And, if you really want it, get in there, have a good time, but it is going to be lined up. When it first started, it wasn't that bad, but there wasn't the vinyl resurgence hadn't started yet. So you just get in there and, you got through pretty quick,
And that leads me to the next point. When you do get in, have a good idea of what it is you're looking for. It's great to go to a record store and hem and haw and dig through stuff, but on record store day, you really have to be focused because there are a lot of people behind you that may or may not be, that you may have been friendly with them in the line prior, but if you stop at the table and go, I don't know, maybe I want this, that's going to really hold things up. So have a real clear idea of your goals for that day.
Yeah, have that list. I mean, there's something that you're going to see. Go, wow, okay, I didn't think about that. That artwork can grab you into another album, and every record store is different how it's set up.
Yep.
And some have it all laid out. Some have it tell us what you're looking for, and we're going to get that for you. It's about organization and how to get that line through quick. Because if you're in the back of the line, you want that to move, and you want to keep it going. And the other thing is, you don't want to be grabbing over somebody. When it's your turn, it's your turn. Be patient. You're going to get there. Sure, you may see that album. You may see that person in front of you going to grab that album. You want to grab it from them. And I've heard stories of that where suddenly someone just bursts through and grabs it. Well, that's not right. That other person was in front of them. Yep. They are to get it, but yet it happens. And it's up to that person there if they want to be a dick or not. Can I say it on a podcast? I guess I did. And so if they can, want to put up a fight for that album. But we shouldn't be doing that. Be calm. You'll get there.
Now, if you haven't made it to the store yet, and this is one that we're very transparent about here at our store ahead of time, and that is, please don't call the store. We're a small staff. It's just family and a couple of friends helping out. Please don't call the store in those first few hours because we just won't answer the phone. We'll do what we can, but we can't promise to do that. So be aware that some smaller stores, maybe even bigger stores, just might not have the opportunity to get to the phone to say, do you have a copy of Taylor Swift left?
I've seen that even in the bigger stores. And if they do answer, they're very short because they have the whole staff's there and everybody is doing everything they can to keep the lines going. And so it's really don't have time for this. They're trying to help the people there. And if you really want something, you need to get there early.
Yep. One final one, and I have to admit that I am guilty of this prior to being a record store owner, and that is please do not bring in records to sell or trade during record store day. And I did that a couple times way before we had the store, and now that that's happened to me a couple times, I realize that was really not a cool thing to do to a record store when they're trying to deal with the crowds of record store day. So that's just avoid that if all possible.
Yeah, that would be because, you're just trying to keep up with the crowd. You don't have time to really look at that. Can I get that? Can I trade this? I got 5 of these albums. I'd like that one there,
We're trying to help as many people as possible.
Yep.
But now this transitions into the bigger subject when record stores are a little bit more mellow outside of the record store day fever when that hits on the day or the day after. And that's just general etiquette in record stores. We do, as we mentioned earlier, have a lot of new people coming in. And they may not know just a few of the things to help make the record store experience better for everybody. And again, I'm trying not to complain about this, but number one on my list is going to have to be don't misfile the records. Now, some record stores are very lax with their organization. I think I pride ourselves on not being one of them. We're probably one of the only ones in the area that has an alphabetized dollar room.
Yes, I think in the United States.
But I see that a lot where folks will pick up something, carry it around with them for a bit, and then decide they don't want it, and then just put it down wherever they happen to be standing.
Yeah. In college, I worked in the library. We had to file books. So I get that, and I always will put it back. Even if I have you put something on the turntable, I will always put it back where I found it. Now, I will have to say this. So before Record Store Day, when I would go to Detroit, I would go to the store the day before, and I would be looking in their used bins because, there was time. And I would be finding these used albums, and I would take them, and I would try to stuff them somewhere else in a rack, just hopefully, okay, so when I come in for Record Store Day, here's these albums I want. They found them. I don't know how these are big record stores, and they went through the racks, and sure as heck, the next day, darn things, they're not there. Like my stack. So yes, I was one of them because I wanted to kind of get through quick and fast. I'll just go grab them, bring them. I'm buying much more records, and then they weren't there, so forget it.
Well, that's a little bit different than just callously setting down a Kenny Rogers record. Well, not that one.
Yeah.
There, but something from the rock section, tossing it back and somewhere else. That's just something not to do. Yep. If you're unsure of where it goes, just ask the folks at the record store if they can reshelve it for you, because they know where it goes. We know where it is.
Yes.
So secondly, though, would be used records especially. You want to make sure that what you're getting is a decent quality copy. So you've got to take it out and inspect it. A lot of new people, though, still don't get the fact that you can't just grab an album with your fingers and pull it out and manhandle it. You got to be careful with these things.
Yeah, it's very true. And you go in and you will see people doing that. Though I do remember one time I was trying to pull one out and it slipped and it broke. Hit the floor and broke. Luckily, this wasn't like a $50, $60 album. They were cool. They did not make me buy it, which I was surprised because you could. That was my fault. I dropped it, but maybe because I had another stack of records, so they thought that was okay. But yeah, you do got to take care of it, because if you don't want it, someone else does want it. And I guess that is an etiquette that most people wouldn't think about if you're just starting, but we don't want that oil or anything on there. We want a clean record.
And we clean our records. All of our used ones get cleaned before they hit the rack, and then somebody brings one up and you take a look at it and it's got fingerprints all over it, and then it reflects on us like, no, we cleaned it. Somebody just fudged it up a little bit. But
yeah, and then, hey, can I get a little more off? This looks a little dirty.
Yeah.
You can ask for
Well, and that gets into the other subject of haggling. I don't mind giving people a couple of bucks off here and there on records. We don't do sales per se. And folks ask me a lot of times about do we have a loyalty program? I said, yeah, it's all up here pointing to my head. Mm-hmm. I know the folks that come in on that. I've been known to haggle on records time again too, but I think that comes down to, from the record store owner perspective, what are you buying? Are you a regular customer? Do I see you once a week, every 3 weeks or so? Are you a return customer? That I think comes into play, rather than just, hey, I'm new to your store. This record says it's $5. I'll give you $2 for it.
Yeah, I rarely will haggle. I understand the business side of this. You're doing this. This is your living. If it is something really expensive, yes, I may ask, hey, can we do something a little better with this? Otherwise, and when I say more expensive, now we're talking over $100. Yeah. That's what I'm looking at. Otherwise, personally, It is someone's trying to make a living here, and so I don't personally feel right, because I worked retail for many years. And even, in big box retail, people would come up, well, can I have more off on that vacuum cleaner? No, you can't. No, we don't haggle, but everyone would come in. Let's haggle. You got this, there's a thread on this shirt that's kind of loose. Can I get more off? No, you can't.
And like I said, as the owner, I don't mind knocking a couple of bucks off here or there, especially if there's something that I missed, like a scratch or something. But as a general rule of thumb, the price is the price. I liken this to Facebook Marketplace. We sell not records through Facebook Marketplace, but I've sold some personal stuff through there. And ultimately, you get that message from somebody, what's the least you'd take on that? My answer always is, what's the most you'd pay for it? So...
A lot of times I'll go into these record stores and I do film. I take pictures and I film. I post it on Facebook and I'll put it onto my videos. One thing I always do is I ask the owner, can I film in here? Can I take pictures? There has been a few cases where they have said no. Mm-hmm. It rarely happens. I've had some where the person, let me call the manager, and they have to go call the manager, which is fine. But That's just the being polite, not just assuming I can come in and take pictures and do whatever I want in there.
Yeah.
Again, it's a store you're walking into.
And as a store owner, I encourage folks to take pictures and share them on social media because that gets the word out. But we've talked before, there's it's now, I think, closed, but there was another store, not locally, but one in a half hour or so away from here, that had signs posted all over. No pictures allowed, no cameras, no phones, blah, blah, blah.
No children.
No children, yeah. And to me, that's a very closed off atmosphere, something that's not very friendly. But what they were trying to do was dissuade people from looking up the items to see if the prices were better somewhere else.
I went there and I bought nothing because of all the no signs. I just go, this is just so. I guess I will say no to buying something because that seems to be the word of the day in here.
That's another subject which we're going to do a follow-up on is since we're kicking this out of Record Store Etiquette, what customers should know, we're going to follow this up next week with what your record store should and shouldn't be doing. So we can get further into that.
Yep.
What about we mentioned this under Record Store Day about patience. So let's say somebody's digging through a bin, especially a new editions bin, and you're impatient behind there waiting to look, and you see that album that you came in for, but somebody's standing in front. What do you do?
You pray, you sweat, you hope that they don't take it, but you need to they're in first. You don't want to crowd them in. I mean, no one likes to have someone butting into them. It's like even if you go to a record show and you're looking in a box and someone else starts to dig in that box, it's just not cool to do. You're working in that bin. And believe me, I look. I remember even your last, you do drops on Friday, and you'll come in, and you see what you want in there, but you're not first in line. There's people line up on Friday to come in. And it's like, oh, please don't take it. And then they grab it and go, damn it. But it happens. It's just that's the way it is. You should have been here 5 minutes earlier.
So it's just a matter of patience. A lot of these are just general rules of thumb about being a human being who's courteous to others.
Yeah. It just kind of hit me. I was just thinking suddenly about with Discogs, especially on Record Store Day, if it's really busy, it's someone's there going on to Discogs. Let me check the price on this, and they're there and you're waiting and you're looking and they're trying to do Discogs on that price on that record and the line is getting hold. I understand what you're doing, but when you have a group of people,
so this is the give and take side of I'm looking through this rack and somebody is waiting behind me to look through that rack. Is be quick and concise.
Yes.
Don't dawdle. If you're going to look something up, step aside.
Yes, you should step aside if you need it, grab it or whatever, but step aside and let the other people in and not do it right there. Very good point, because you got a line of people and you got to keep it moving. And I think for me, one of the most important things as a customer is I like to help people. And so, for instance, I'll go over and I'll stand by where we have Joan Baez and Judy Collins, and I try to tell everyone, you don't want this. I mean, this is a public service thing. I am helping them to say, I don't think you want to buy that. That Engelbert Humperdinck, I just say no to that. You don't want this. And so I try to help the new people just move on to whole something else, and I'll bring them in. This is here's what you have to have. It's just the weirdest stuff in the whole wide world, but it'll change your life.
That leads to, and that would be why we have so much Joan Baez here now. I get it. But that leads to another thing about folks. Again, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But sometimes I think people just want to dig through a record shelf in peace.
Yeah.
Others love the conversation and going back and forth with other record store owners. But I get it that sometimes that this is a fortress of solitude for some that come in for some vinyl therapy and they just want to look. Maybe they don't want to hear about opinions about a certain artist or album. You don't want to get that. That just sucks.
Yeah.
That happens a lot where folks who are just overly friendly maybe hitting on people who are a little more introverted with their opinions.
Yes. Oh, there's no doubt. You see something. Are you sure on that one? You want this. Because we're passionate about the music. And let's face it, we each have our own collection. And we know that the records in our collection by far are the best. And what anybody else has, they don't know what they're doing. So if we could get everyone to have our collection, it would be a much better place. And so you have that passion. But when I go shopping, I don't mind conversing with people. But you're right. There are many people, as I get to record stores, you see them. It is the third. It's just this time where they're enjoying browsing a rack, looking, seeing what's there. Let them be in peace.
Again, comes back down to we're being respectful humans to one another. And I think I've gotten fairly decent about reading that when customers come in. I can almost tell when somebody is having a little bit of a quandary about what they were looking for. They're not quite certain versus somebody who just wants to listen to the music that we're playing.
Yeah.
So hopefully this helps. I mean, if you're new to this, you're getting a little bit of the pros and cons on either side. And as I keep saying, I think it comes down to just being a general courteous human being, no matter what it is you're doing. But you led me to this other point. We've joked about this before, and for all of the folks who are new to vinyl, and I've seen this example week after week after week, what is the absolute number one rule about shopping for records? When you pick something up, don't put it back, because what'll happen?
Someone else is going to grab it. It always disappears. It goes.
We have that happen a lot where folks will come back even later that day or the next day and say, oh, I had this in my hand the other day, but I put it down. Is it still here?
I think everyone listening to that has a million stories of that. It happens all the time. Yes, if you're not sure, grab it. And you know what? If you don't like it, bring it to the store down the road, and I'm sure they'll exchange it for something else for you. But the other thing, I guess, for Record Store Day is don't forget to eat sandwiches and drink coffee as you're shopping.
Well, I didn't even get into the whole idea of people looking at records while holding a giant cup of coffee. I literally have had someone in the store before eating a giant sloppy looking sandwich while they're looking at records. And all I can think is like, please, you know what? I don't have a no food or no drink sign because I don't want to do that. But at the same token, don't come in with your meatball sub and then go thumbing through the racks.
I've seen that. It is a little cringe as they touch the stuff. And go, oh boy. Well, okie doke.
Well, I hope this helps, and I hope we didn't offend too many people looking at getting into records. It's not that we're being closed off as record store owners or fellow record shoppers. It's just that we want to make this as enjoyable of an experience for everyone,
yes,
as possible.
Because it should be. Record Store Day is a great time, but anytime you go record shopping should be a fun time. That's what we do. That's our Zen area, and you want to enjoy it. And when we can all be nice and not buy Joan Baez and Judy Collins, it's the world's a better place.
Well, cool. Now, the flip side of this, on next week's podcast, you want to commit to talking about what your record stores should and should not be doing? We'll flip the tables on me.
I think so, because I'm sure that there can be a big list of things that we should be doing, like giving me just a permanent discount. But yeah, let's do it.
Go from there. Well, thank you everyone again for listening to our podcast, Two Guys Talking About Records. I'm Jim Gleason, and I'm a record store owner.
Steve Carlson, record collector.
And you can find Steve on YouTube at his channel.
Yep, Steve Carlson, Vinyl Community, or is it Vinyl Community Steve Carlson? Flip it around one way or the other.
Just don't go looking for that Two Guys Talking About Lettuce in the vegetable community.
That's right.
And you can find us at RadioWastelandRecords.com. Thank you, Steve. We will talk to you next week.
And I'm going to go get some mustard now. For some reason, I got it in my head. I need some Grey Poupon.